progressing spiritually? This is an important question which every aspirant asks themselves at some time or other. It's also a difficult question to answer because the spirit has no form. So how can you measure something without a form? So before trying to define what we mean by spiritual progress, let's try to define what we mean by spiritual. In yoga, we talk about the human dilemma of egoism, the habit of identifying with the body, the emotions, and the mind. We also talk about the five bodies. That is the physical body, known as the food body, or Anandamaya Kosha, the vital body, known as the Pranamaya Kosha, which is the seat of our emotions and desires and impulses to act, which is more subtle than the physical and which animates the physical body. We also talk about the third body, which is even more subtle, the mental body, or Manomaya Kosha, which is the seat of our sense faculties, hearing, smelling, tasting, seeing, touching, and the memories in the subconscious mind. We also talk about something even more subtle, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, intellectual body, where we have our reasoning faculty, where our abstract ideas exist. Finally, the most subtle of all, the spiritual body, the Anandamaya Kosha, which is pure consciousness, which is without form, which is outside of time, which is always blissful, which is the one constant in our life throughout all the movements of our life. Ordinarily, because of egoism, we identify with the physical body, movements of the vital or the mental body, or even our thoughts. Some days we feel happy or even blissful, and we say so. We say, I'm happy, I'm so blissful. And other days we feel depressed, we feel anxious, we feel apprehensive. And we even say so. We say, I'm depressed. So obviously we can't be these opposites of happiness and depressed. So who are you? Therefore, spiritual progress must involve a progressive identification with the one true constant in our life, the spiritual body, which is pure consciousnness, which is the part of us which is a witness to all the dramas of our life, and a progressive letting go of the false identification born of egoism with the physical sensations, the emotions, and the thoughts and memories. In the beginning, this involves following certain moral or religious injunctions to avoid things such as greed, pride, anger, impatience, lying, harming, exaggerating, which are all manifestations of the ego. These things, of course, attract our human nature. And we're all like people sitting in front of a television set. The program on the television is your life. And we're all sitting too close to it because we become absorbed in the dramas of our life. We become absorbed in the anger and the fear and the pride. So our development as spiritual beings occurs as we begin to sit back further away from the television set and to develop a new perspective, a perspective of our soul, which is the witness, which is the observer. Through this, we begin to free ourselves of this false identification of egoism. And we begin to realize our true self. This is known as the experience of self-realization. Ultimately, as this experience becomes a permanent state, permanent perspective, we reach the state of what we call self-realization or enlightenment. We'll also begin to see that this in itself is not the highest state, that we need not simply leave this world and leave it to go to another more spiritual place. We begin to realize that we can begin to bring this spiritual consciousness, this perspective of our soul, into all the dimensions of our life, including the physical, vital, mental, and intellectual, and resolve its issues and the challenges that we have in this world. Initially, however, we are progressing spiritually to the extent that we identify with that part of us which is a witness, and to the extent that we let go of the false identification with the impulses of the vital body, with all its desires and pride and the movements of the mind. This development goes through at least 4 stages. The first stage is the development of calmness. Calmness is not the absence of thoughts or emotions. Calmness is being present with the thoughts and emotions. So in this first stage, we replace the habitual manner of reacting, for example, with anger or with anxiety, with a calm presence. The stain of mental delusion, known as Maya, is weakened gradually by cultivating calmness. All the practices of yoga, for example, the postures, breathing, meditation, mantras, devotional activity, have as their purpose the development of calmness, known as sattva in yoga, a state of equilibrium where we feel balanced, our mind is clear, and the diminishing of the habitual moods of what we call rajas, unnecessary activity, nervousness, and the mood of what we call tamas, or inertia, fatigue, discouragement, doubt. This brings us into the presence, sat, or truth. By practicing detachment, we begin to let go of the need to be absorbed in the experiences. Patanjali refers to detachment as vairagya. We develop it in stages. The first stage requires that one make an effort to let go of one's interest or involvement in the thoughts and the emotions. First in practicing meditation, and later in daily life. By doing so, one gradually purifies oneself of the false ego-based perspective. At a later stage, this detachment becomes effortless. One is detached regardless of the situation, regardless of the outcome.